January 15th, 1919. Boston, Massachusetts, lunchtime. People in the North End hear a sound like a machine gun, a rapid metallic pop, 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 followed by a roar, and then a wave hits the neighborhood. 25 feet tall, moving at 35 miles an hour, made of molasses. 21 people are about to be killed by dessert syrup. This is not a joke. This is one of the deadliest industrial disasters in Boston's history, and it is somehow also the stickiest. This is Oops History, true stories that sound fake. Today, the Great Molasses Flood. Let's back up 4 years. 1915. The Purity Distilling Company, owned by United States Industrial Alcohol, builds a gigantic storage tank in Boston's North End, one of the most crowded neighborhoods in America. The tank is 50 feet tall, 90 feet across, and holds 2.3 million gallons of molasses. Why so much molasses? Because molasses ferments into industrial alcohol, and industrial alcohol makes munitions, and in 1915 there is a world war with an absolutely bottomless appetite for explosives. Molasses was war fuel. This tank was a money printer, and because it was a money printer, it was built at maximum speed and minimum care. The whole thing went up in a matter of weeks. It was never inspected by an engineer. It was never even filled with water for a leak test. That would have cost time. The man overseeing construction couldn't read a blueprint. I want that to sink in. The largest liquid storage structure in the neighborhood was signed off by a guy for whom the plans were decorative. The tank leaked from day one. It leaked so visibly that neighborhood kids would come with cans and cups and scrape free molasses off the sides. Local families collected it for cooking, and when residents complained about the constant oozing and the groaning sounds the steel made, the company responded with a solution so evil it loops back around to comedy. They painted the tank brown so you couldn't see the leaks anymore. That was the fix. Camouflage. One employee, a man named Isaac Gonzalez, was so terrified of the tank that he ran to warn his bosses repeatedly, and reportedly even skipped sleep to check on it at night. His superiors ignored him completely. Remember Isaac. Isaac was right. Now, January 1919. 2 days before the disaster, a fresh shipment of warm molasses arrives by ship and is pumped into the tank, filling it nearly to the top. Then the weather does something Boston weather loves. It swings from 2 degrees Fahrenheit to 40 degrees in about a day. The warm, fresh molasses on top of cold, old molasses likely kicked off fermentation, building gas pressure inside a tank already held together by hope and brown paint. January 15th, 12:30 p.m. The rivets let go. So that machine gun sound. The steel tears open and 2.3 million gallons of molasses exit the tank all at once. Here's the thing people get wrong about this story. You hear molasses and think slow, but 26 million pounds of liquid released at once doesn't dribble. It detonates outward. The wave was 2.5 stories tall at the start, moving 35 miles an hour, so faster than you can sprint, and dense as wet concrete. It wasn't a spill. It was a brown tsunami with the mass of a freight train. The wave snapped the steel supports of the elevated railway. A train had just passed. It picked up a firehouse and shoved it off its foundation with firefighters inside. It flattened buildings, flipped wagons, and swept horses and people down the streets. Waist-deep molasses filled the neighborhood, and then, because it was January, it started to cool and set. The flood hardened around whatever it had caught. Rescuers had to fight for every person, cutting them out of stiffening syrup that pulled like quicksand. 21 people died. About 150 were injured. Several horses were lost. It took days to search the wreckage because everything, bodies, survivors, rubble, was glazed in brown. I'll be honest with you, this episode has a body count, and this part isn't funny. What is worth your anger is why it happened, because nothing about it was an accident. It was arithmetic. Speed plus greed minus inspection equals this. The cleanup took weeks. Crews used saltwater fire hoses to cut the hardened molasses and sand to soak it up. The harbor ran brown until summer, and molasses traveled on boots, on wheels, on hands, until famously everything in Boston was sticky. Streetcar seats, payphone handles, doorknobs across the city. For decades afterward, locals swore the North End still smelled like molasses on hot summer days. Then came the reckoning. Victims filed one of the first class action style suits against a major corporation in American history. Over 100 claims consolidated. And the company's defense was spectacular. They blamed anarchists. Italian anarchists, they claimed, must have bombed the tank. Their evidence, vibes, and the GE,